welcome to the third episode of Recluse Horror. This is a daily horror movie review podcast. Just a little background. I started a project on my birthday of last year, reviewing and watching a horror movie every single day. That was in April, so it's been a little while. While this is only the third episode of the podcast, it is the 270th review I've done in a row daily. With me today is Sam, who was here on my first episode. Sam?
Hey.
Just a heads up about the review that we're about to go into. The Most Dangerous Game from 1932. While most of the reviews that I do have very, very limited spoilers, due to the title of this pretty much giving it away, there will be pretty much full spoilers in this. So if you're interested in seeing it and you don't want my impressions to influence your opinion, go ahead and skip this. It's probably about 20 minutes in. Go ahead and skip to about 20 minutes in where I talk about the other two movies that I'm going to talk about. Yeah, full on spoilers for this one. If you're familiar with the term "the most dangerous game" and what that implies, then you probably know pretty much anything I'm going to say about it. But if you don't, then I encourage you to go ahead and skip this if you're interested in seeing the movie. If not, go ahead and listen. So, Sam, how did you feel about The Most Dangerous Game?
I liked it.
Yeah. I liked it as well. I thought that if you know the twist, it's a little hard to get past, I think. And I think it makes the pacing of the movie feel a bit slower to modern audiences.
Yeah, because you're just waiting for them to start hunting them.
Yeah.
You're just, that's like the beginning is you waiting for them to start hunting them. And the best part of the movie probably is before they start hunting them.
Yeah.
So you're waiting for it to happen, but you're missing the best part of the movie, which is them talking about, hinting about the whole idea of hunting people.
Right.
That's the best stuff in the movie.
Yeah. So, this movie stars Fay Wray, who is best known as Anne from King Kong. She did a bunch of Universal pictures back in the day. This one is an RKO picture, which, if you're not familiar with RKO, they are one of the biggest names in sci-fi, old, 1930s, 40s sci-fi. Their stuff is known to be usually very low budget, very, I guess, how would you characterize their style?
I don't know. They came out with a lot of good stuff.
They did, yes.
It's just hard to gauge it from the 30s to now.
Yeah.
Because low budget is not quite right. Like, they came out with King Kong.
Yeah.
And that was, that at the time that was like incredibly unique.
Right. And this movie does have a slight connection to to King Kong other than Fay Wray. This movie was actually filmed on the same sets as King Kong was, and it was filmed at night, I believe almost at the same time as King Kong. Sometimes it's a little bit hard to get that information. But it stars both Fay Wray and Robert Armstrong, who played the male and female lead actors in that film. There's also the actual lead of the Most Dangerous Game is somebody else who I didn't really bother to look up, which I should have.
I can't remember.
Yeah, I can't remember what his name is, but Robert Armstrong was a really big, like a very common cast member in Warner Brothers pictures, I think, at a certain point in his career. I don't know if it was before or after this. And Fay Wray did a lot of these sort of pictures. Like I said, she got her started in Universal and stuff like that as a leading lady. So yeah, it's sort of an interesting film. The premise, if you hadn't guessed by the title, is essentially um, this this group of hunters. They're going out to go hunting something. I don't even remember what it was because, to be honest, it was a little hard to pay attention when you knew like where this was going and why they weren't doing it. But they get themselves marooned on an well, not marooned actually. They shipwreck off the coast of this island, and the only survivor makes his way to what appears to be the only standing building on the place, and the person who owns it decides he's going to hunt people. It's a thing he's been doing for a while. Now the first thing that I really noticed about Robert Armstrong playing the I guess the antagonist is he's supposed to be Russian, but he has the worst accent.
No, that's Leslie Banks. Robert
Oh, it is?
Armstrong plays the other guy.
Oh, okay. I thought Robert Armstrong was the for some reason I thought Robert Armstrong was playing the bad guy.
No, he plays what's his name in this? Is it Martin? Is that his name?
No, it's not Martin. Martin was one of the guys on
Oh, is the brother was Martin.
Yeah.
Is it Bob?
No.
I don't remember.
Okay, so Robert Armstrong was playing the Fay Wray's brother, who's another character in the movie. Sorry, that was Sam's phone. But yeah, his accent was just atrocious. Regardless, Leslie, whatever, his accent was just terrible. Playing Zaroff, the Russian lead. That's a kind of a feature in a lot of these older movies. Before there was a lot of sort of more global culture, people would get away with the worst accents. I think some of the funniest is if you go back and watch early British stuff, even into the 40s and 50s actually. You can find people playing American accents, and they always have these terrible like southern drawls, even though they're supposed to be from like New York or something, because when they think of Americans, or at least at certain points when they thought of Americans, they would think of southern accents, and it wasn't really considered important to be terribly accurate.
They're the easiest to
sort of emulate.
Yeah, to do. Like
it's definitely the most accented accent in American. Well, I mean, I guess Bronx is pretty close or something like that, or Brooklyn. So yeah, the pacing was pretty slow, huh?
No and yes. No and yes.
I think it's just if you know
I think
that
you
the
just
twist
know
is
what's
coming.
supposed to happen. I've actually read the short story, and I know, like, I kind of know what's in the short story, and I know what they put in the movie, so I'm kind of just waiting for all that stuff to happen. So it takes a minute, but yeah, the pacing's weird, especially because it's not a long movie.
Yeah,
so it's weird that you would think the pacing was bad at all, but it's basically two halves.
Yeah,
there's the half before they start hunting them, and there's a half when they just start hunting them.
Yeah, there's a straight line between those two for sure. And some of the best stuff, as you kind of mentioned before, some of the best stuff comes from the speeches and postulating and whatever in the beginning of the movie before they've sort of revealed the twist here that he's going to hunt these people. He has these very long speeches about hunting and I don't know, whatever silly stuff, but it has some of the best language and some of the best writing in it. I actually thought that the dialogue was pretty smart, most of it.
The best stuff in the movie to me was the stuff that they had in the short story that they just mostly transferred over. Like all the best lines are basically in the short story. Mm-hmm. And that's good.
Right?
It's good they put the best lines in there from the short story.
Yeah.
It'd be one of those things you're like, why didn't they put that line in? That makes the movie make sense.
Yeah.
So it was good in that way. Like I always liked this story, and just the idea of like what people decide is like a game and sport, and that's like fueled a million other movies about that. I could list off a ton of them. But any sort of movie like that, an idea like that, that's one of the first ideas. Was a short story, and then the movie about what it would be like a man hunting sport or a human hunting sports human sports. I don't know what they would consider it.
Yeah. So Fay Wray's brother in the movie is the most annoying human being on the face of the planet. Would you agree?
Yeah, he's pretty dumb.
He plays this very drunk, oafish, friendly at least, sort of person, and they spend so long with him being ridiculous and loud and obnoxious that by the time they actually get around to the real plot of the movie, like the real meat of the movie, you are just so glad that he's finally going to be off screen, which is, I think, is a better job at showing somebody being drunk and obnoxious than I've seen in a lot of movies. I wouldn't say that it was realistic, their interpretation of a drunk person, but it was definitely the feeling you get when you're sober hanging around.
Yeah, and you just want them to leave.
Right,
You're just just leave.
You have to go. Shut up, drink some water, sit down.
I'm so glad you're out of my house or / out of my movie.
Right, exactly. So that was pretty interesting. Usually depictions of people being drunk in this era, I feel like they're a little more low key than that generally, or it's just somebody falling over and slightly slurring.
Which is kind of more. He was very imposing.
Yes,
imposing himself into everything.
Yeah. So, what did you feel about Fay Wray's character in this?
It was weird how uneven it was.
Yeah.
It was neat in some aspects and stupid in other aspects. You could kind of see that they were trying to make her smart, but they didn't know where to make her smart and which ways. Yeah. And they didn't know, necessarily when to let her do stuff in the movie. Right. So that was kind of weird. Yeah. She couldn't open doors and stuff like that, but she could figure out a plan and things like that. Kind of, yeah. So it was kind of weird. It was good, especially for I don't know, especially for the time. Yeah. I guess I don't know. I kind of felt the same. In the beginning, I was a little disappointed because in the beginning of the movie they sort of not imply, but you can sort of gather from it that again they're trying to make an intelligent character, and you kind of see them start to play with that, and then they're like, no, but then we just need a girl to fawn and faint and to be in the movie. Yeah, exactly. Even the pretense of her to even being there at all. Yeah, was yo, this probably would be easier without a second person. I don't care who it is. Just another person in the way. Yeah, is probably not really gonna help in what we're trying to do. Right. No matter who it was. Now I used the term lamp, and I realized that at least in my my verbal reviews, I have not explained what that term is. It's one of my favorite terms about storytelling. A lamp as a character is something. It's usually a female character, but not always. If basically the idea is if you can take a lamp, like a lighting fixture, and replace your character with that, and it wouldn't substantially change the plot, you have written a lamp. And this is one of the best examples of a lamp, at least past the first few minutes or so. No, I think it still has that second half thing. The first half, she's doing stuff. She's that's true. Detecting stuff. She's reading the mood of the situation. Because they don't know they're going to be hunted. Yeah. She's the one who's we're going to be hunted, and telling the other characters. Yeah. And then, even when it's obvious, they kind of don't believe her. Yeah. But they're she's skeptical. The one doing all that until the second half of the movie, and then it just changes. And then she's a lamp for almost, the entire thing. She totally is. She can't even, open locks and stuff like that. She pretty much just, yells. Yeah. screams or whatever.
I mean, and that's again, that's indicative of the era. Some people get, I mean, I get annoyed by that in modern movies, but you kind of have to take that as it comes. I think she does, for what the role is, I think she does a good job. I think her acting is pretty good, and she does sort of try to play the line a little bit more than you sometimes see in those movies where it's literally, this is just a scream queen, this is just somebody who is here to yell and, you know, be the
In
object.
trouble.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So when they actually get around to hunting the characters down, the traps that they come up with are just, they immediately fail. They're so bad. They come up with a couple of traps to try to get the antagonist, and they're just terrible, obnoxious play. They have a really long time at one point to set up a trap, and for whatever reason, it just takes them literally every moment that they show. They imply that it's taken them almost an entire day to build this trap, for some reason, even though it doesn't seem like it would take that long, and it just falls flat. What did you feel about that?
I think that's one of the reasons the second half is weaker.
Yeah,
is you don't really feel like the cat and mouse tension ever.
Yeah, as much as they try to build it, and they do.
Yeah, that's like the whole second half, and it just doesn't play well.
Right.
And that's really my problem with like I still think it's pretty good. I actually like it probably more than I should, and maybe that's because I read the short story, right? And I like the deeper meaning of it, like with humanity, and what's wrong with them. Yeah. But that's the part that really doesn't work that well for me. Is there's supposed to be tension? It doesn't really build it that well, and like the theme of the movie doesn't really fit that part either. Like the overarching music, the set, the not setting, the setting's good, but the visuals of the setting doesn't really help it too much, because it's really good. The setting's really nice looking. Yeah. But yeah, just the overall feeling of tension that the movie needs. Yeah. That should build at the end. Like those traps not working at all. Like no, at all. Not seeming clever. At all.
No.
It just feels like they dumbly stumble into safety at the end. Right. It's like that's like oh we outsmarted the hunter by what? Making some shitty traps and then running away and then the movie's over. And then the movie's over. So there was some pretty unique shots, I felt like, in this movie that you definitely didn't see at the time. A lot of filmmaking in this time, and usually it was more less on sound stages and so forth, and more on like house sets and stuff like that. But there were a lot of fixed position camera stuff in shots at this time, and this actually had a lot of there were some. I don't know if they're on a dolly or what, but they had some moving camera shots. They had one particular shot where the dogs are hunting, the dogs are out and running about, and they actually have a shot from underneath so you can see them sort of jumping and running over it. What did you feel about the filmmaking? Especially, I mean, in the context of a 30s movie. 30s. It was really good. I feel like a lot of aspects were really good, especially within the filmmaking itself. Yeah. I can't name anything particular on the filming that I liked, but definitely every shot was pretty good, pretty interesting. But offhand, I'm not really thinking of anything that I really grasped onto.
Yeah, I just noticed that the few shots that were like that, the few sort of action shots that you wouldn't necessarily get in those, because it's so rare to see them in 30s cinema. It's just not. It's not a common feature. It wasn't really thought of a lot of times that you could even move the camera. Like, you set the camera and then you film the scene. A lot of the reason for that in early filmmaking, especially in silent films and stuff, is that they're transitioning the idea of theater, which has, you are an audience member at a certain point and you just look on the stage. They can't move much on the stage, maybe set pieces and so forth. But the stage itself cannot move, so why would the camera? The audience member cannot move, so why would the camera? And so I think it took a little bit of...
also, cameras being super heavy.
Very, very heavy with the giant film canisters on top. I'm sure you've seen one of those things, but I'm sure they would surprise you with just how heavy they were at the time and how top heavy, even with a tripod, underneath it. They were not terribly stable and sometimes would fall over in the middle of filmmaking and you'd lose your shot and possibly your camera. But yeah, so it is rare to see in some early films. People just wouldn't even want to risk the movement of the camera. But yeah, so it took a little bit of time to come around to that being more common. And now, if you see a movie with a fixed camera, it's really more strange than anything else. Did you have any other final thoughts about the movie? Was there anything that you maybe wanted to see from the movie more that didn't play or?
No, I like I said, I think it's really good. I just feel like they didn't capture the mood of the story, of the theme.
Right.
Of
you don't necessarily feel the tension.
You don't feel the duality of human beings being wanting to hunt and also survive.
Yeah.
And you don't feel the tension at the end that you need to feel that way.
Right.
To have that resonate at all.
Yeah.
And that's all. And a lot of it has to do with the time era. It seems very stock to the time,
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Just the way they kind of made movies and put them out and what they needed in them.
Yeah.
So that makes it limiting, but overall, I still think it's a cool movie, and a cool idea and well made.
Right. Yeah, I felt like it was good for what it was. I felt that other than the filmmaking, there wasn't really much that set it apart from other movies. The subject matter probably was a little shocking for the time. That's not really so much the case anymore. If you're into early 30s cinema, if you like Fay Wray, if you're interested in seeing the King Kong set from a different perspective, I think this is, an easy watch, a pretty easy watch. It's also in the public domain since the 1960 or something, so you can watch it for free on YouTube. There is a couple of colorized versions as well. I don't know if those are in the public domain. But yeah, you can watch it completely for free and not feel like you're stealing it. Okay, so yeah, that's The Most Dangerous Game. Okay, so the next film that we're going to talk about, every episode I do one film that's new that I haven't reviewed before, and then I go back, at least until I run out, I go back and do two of the films that I have previously reviewed and talk about them. Since you probably, if you're listening to a podcast, are not really interested in reading 200 and some odd text reviews. Just as a heads up, while that movie got spoiled completely, these will not have the same level of spoilers. The first one that I'm going to talk about is the fifth movie that I reviewed for this project. It's called The Midnight Meat Train. It's from 2008. Basically, the premise of the movie is about a photographer who's played by a pre-Hangover Bradley Cooper, who's trying to break into the art world when he finds out that he's recently photographed a woman who disappears the night before he photographed her, or the night after he photographed her. At least that's the start of the movie, without giving away anything that, without giving away the actual plot. That's as best as it can be kind of synopsized. So what did you think about this movie?
I just think it's funny that the idea of this movie being able to be spoiled.
Yeah,
is
I don't want to give away that.
It's a movie called The Midnight Meat Train. So it's exactly what anybody would think would happen
Probably.
on a midnight meat train.
It's true.
It was a horror movie.
Yeah. It's
so
true.
if I don't even know what to talk about then, if we're holding off on the inevitability of you being someone who got lost to the midnight meat train movie.
Yeah.
I guess.
I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know either. That was mine.
I just don't. I feel really bad how much we spoiled that last movie.
I don't.
You said a bunch of stuff that I wasn't planning on.
I don't care.
On spoiling, so.
I know they should have. Who that 1932 movie?
Yeah, but the whole point is spoiler-free reviews. So okay, the cast is really good in this. It's a really strangely star-studded cast for the movie that it is. It includes Vinnie Jones from Snatch, and he is also what's his name, Bullet Tooth Tony, I think, from Lock, Stock, and Two Smoking Barrels. Big, imposing British guy. You've probably seen him in stuff. Leslie Bibb, who's been in 1,000 TV shows, the Iron Man movies, The Skulls. It has Brooke Shields, mainly famous for being Brooke Shields, I think.
I forgot she was in that movie.
Yeah. And Roger Bart, who was in a movie called Excision that I really, really liked.
Yeah, Excision is super good.
Yeah. And a mini-series called The Lost Room, which probably nobody is familiar with, but he's been in a million things. Good. Yeah, which is also super good. And about 50 things that probably everybody else knows him from that I just, somehow didn't see. The movie was a little slow-paced. It has really good production value. Other than there's a few misuses I thought of CGI in the movie. Some of it was like really bad for no reason. It's also incredibly gory.
Yeah, I was gonna say, is that a spoiler that it's
No.
Incredibly gory?
No. It was written by Clive Barker, who you probably know him from Hellraiser. He's written a lot of stuff actually, and so much of it has been turned into movies, or he has written or directed it, several movies. But it's it feels very Clive Barker, which is a feeling that I like. Go ahead.
It feels like something Clive Barker woke up in the middle of the night, wrote down on a napkin, and then they made a movie about it.
Well, it's based on a short story of his, which is why it probably could have used a little more than it got as far as like filler is concerned. I wouldn't say that there's anything that's specifically filler, but it definitely feels like there's a lot of air in the movie. But it's very, the atmosphere is very good. The visuals, again, other than the couple of CG mishaps, is very good. And I think the misuse of the CGI is only in the end of the movie, but yeah. I can't remember. I can't remember
100% either.
The acting is pretty good, I thought, although it did take me a little bit to buy Bradley Cooper as that photographer. For whatever reason, he just doesn't come across as a brooding artist. Like a photographer. They try to play him in kind of the same, not exactly the same, but in that same way as Sinister, where it's like a brooding artist that's kind of being held back from his career by one thing or another. Not specifically his family in this, but again, that artist thing that they really try to push.
Kind of like a struggling artist trying to like find his voice.
Yeah, exactly.
I remember that. That was stupid.
And find a market, too.
That was stupid.
Yeah. But I mean, other than that, and honestly, I did eventually warm up to the role, so it wasn't too bad.
I did not.
Full disclosure, I always love Vinnie Jones. I always love Vinnie Jones. I think he's incredible. But this was no exception. I thought he was just phenomenal in this. His character had a very severe limitation to it that I'm not going to spoil, and I thought he did a very good job of playing through that and still getting across what they were trying to get across in that role. The plot at first seems sort of like a pretty standard story, but you keep wondering what the hell is going on through the whole movie. Like, why is what's happening? Like, what is the whole point of this? And that did make it pretty compelling despite the slow pace, I thought. Sam, I know you didn't like this.
No, I disagree. I know. I didn't like the movie. I was very bored with trying to figure out what was happening. The only thing that made it worth watching was the gore and the Clive Barker-ness
tone.
Clive Barker-ness of the movie. It's very Clive Barker-y, especially once you get to the end and you're like, oh,
yeah.
If you didn't know Clive Barker did it at the end, you'll be like, oh,
Clive Barker.
Is this a Hellraiser shoot-off?
Yeah, I actually, I think I came into it not knowing that it was Clive Barker, but pretty soon into the movie, that feeling.
Yeah. It was
and then I looked it up, and I was like, yep, it was.
This is very familiar feeling. Not in a bad way, in a good way. No, not
in a very good way, yeah. This has been tested a couple of times, I think, since I watched this movie. And I think no matter what I've seen of Clive Barker's adaptations, I don't think there has been one that I haven't liked. Maybe this is on the low end, even for me, for Clive Barker stuff. To be fair, I have not seen all of the Hellraiser movies. I have seen the first 2 or 3, I think. And just they have not been on streaming platforms or cheap enough for me to buy them. But yeah, I really love Clive Barker's work. If you don't like Clive Barker, you may not appreciate this movie. But to be fair, I would say this feels the least Clive Barker of all of them. Would you say that you've seen?
Maybe, but that's bad.
Yeah,
because
Clive Barker has a great feel.
Yeah, the slower parts are the parts
that are usually
completely devoid of that.
Yeah. So it's really hard to talk about this with spoilers, obviously. But the ending of the movie kind of left a few questions on the table. All I can say about that is that if you did have any blanks that you'd like filled in, if you didn't like some of the ambiguities of it, you should go ahead and look up the short story online. That'll explain pretty much anything that you need to know. That might be bothering you about the story, because it did kind of just feel like it built up to something and then ended a little prematurely. You can fill in the blanks, you really can, and you'll probably be right. What did you feel about the ending? Did it feel sudden to you, or did it feel like it's over?
It felt like it took too long for that to happen. Even with the end, you could have continued the movie. With the end. So maybe sudden in the way that it happens really fast. Sudden not in the way that it could have happened way sooner.
Both could have happened. It could have happened. So... It did end in a kind of strange place, where if it had ended earlier, it would have made sense, or if it ended later, it might have made sense.
With the end, it's kind of like they reveal something at the end. Even with the reveal of that, the movie could have kept going.
It's true.
And I'm usually very like, oh, the monster's dead, the movie's over.
Yeah.
But this movie could have kept going and still been interesting. And
it kind of felt like the
forward.
Start of the it
felt like the start of the movie. Yeah, that's probably what made me think that.
I wonder if they're working on a sequel. I should look that up. I'm gonna pause and look that up. Okay, so I looked it up, and it looks like originally Clive Barker was talking about wanting to do a trilogy of Midnight Meat Train movies. I guess there was some mishandling on the part, according to Clive Barker at least, there was some mishandling of the way the movie was released into theaters by Lionsgate. And so there was a little bit of a squabble there, but Clive Barker was more than willing to put it aside to try to make more movies. But it seems like that's probably not going to happen if it hasn't happened. However, Clive Barker did say that he would be, if all else fails, he would definitely tell more information about the story by putting out more books. You know, he's always more than willing to write books. So that hopefully we'll see that at some point. I haven't heard anything about any releases of new stories about that particular story, so I'm not sure. Okay, so did you have any final thoughts about Midnight Meat Train?
I didn't really like it. So it's not really a recommend for me unless you love Clive Barker.
I do.
Or super love gore, like you need to see every movie with gore in it.
Yeah.
Because I don't think overall the story's that good or the performances.
Really?
Well, what's his name? Vinny.
Vinny Jones.
Yeah, Vinny Jones. He's the only person I could remember
being in the
movie. And a bunch of the other people are like famous people from other bigger stuff. Like Suddenly Susan's in it. I did not remember that she
Leslie
was
Bibb.
in it. No. Brooke Shields was Suddenly Susan.
Brooke Shields. Oh, okay.
She is,
Yeah.
she's a big ass star, and I did not remember. I didn't remember The Hangover was in it. All I can remember is that Vinny Jones was in it, and I was like, oh yeah, I remember that movie, but I don't remember any of the people. I don't remember
Roger Bart.
Yeah, I don't remember much of the actual story. So it's just like that kind of movie. I don't recommend it.
I kind of felt. Well, first of all, I think part of not remembering those actors being in it, definitely Vinnie Jones was the only one I specifically remembered. I was pretty sure it was somebody like Brad Cooper who played the other lead. So one of those sort of big, hunky, why are you doing this sort of role people, kind of like Mark Wahlberg as the science teacher in The Happening. Not quite that bad. But yeah. So I think it splits most of the movie between Bradley Cooper, who's playing a very uncharacteristic role, so you wouldn't necessarily remember it's him unless he did it well, which, to be fair, he did it okay, but not well. Vinnie Jones also has the other half of most of the screen time.
Yeah.
And he does a fabulous job.
Yeah.
So I think, personally, my recommendation is, again, if you like Clive Barker, definitely watch it. If you like gore, definitely watch it. If you like really atmospheric, sort of moody horror films that are, it's a very strange combination for me of moody and gory, which sometimes sometimes it's hard to make those feel good. It doesn't. Sometimes if you're trying to go for moody and gory, you end up with gritty, and this doesn't do that to me. It doesn't feel gritty. It feels much more polished. And also gory. Does that make sense? Yeah,
a Tool music video mixed with a Nine Inch Nails music video.
That's not
Midnight Meat Train.
Oh my god, that's not far off. Okay, so I think that's it for the Midnight Meat Train. You didn't have anything else?
No.
Okay. Yeah. I say watch it. Sam says don't watch it. I don't necessarily say that it would be a specific recommendation, but I liked it. On to the next one that I watched, and this one was not good. So, every Friday I did, and I'm still planning on doing this with the podcast reviews as well. I did a foreign film, but just to get started, because I didn't have a lot of time to make a selection this time, I found an Australian movie called Patrick from 2013. Some places it's listed as 2014. So Patrick, I didn't realize this at the time, is a remake of the 1978 film that has the same name. I have not seen it. I would have picked something else had I known that it was a remake. It's about a nurse who goes to work at a psychiatric clinic in which a doctor is performing experiments on a comatose patient named Patrick, in the hopes of waking him. Despite the readings of his brainwave activity, the nurse begins to believe that he is actually aware or conscious in some way. So, Sam, how did you feel about this movie?
I dislike this movie.
Yeah, I actively disliked this movie as well. I think probably the best way to describe it, in the words of Douglas Adams, it's mostly harmless. It had fair production value. The camera work was fine. The effects, music, and acting. In fact, the movie it has a couple of actors that are really good. Charles Dance and Rachel Griffith are in supporting roles. Both of which give very good performances. They're probably underused. It also features a small role by Eliza Taylor from The 100, if you watch that show. What did you think about the acting?
I can almost remember nothing about this movie.
Really?
I've seen it. I know what it's about. I've actually never seen the remake either.
You mean
I
the
would
original?
Yeah, the original, sorry. And I would like to, but this... I hated this movie. So, I can't remember the acting. I can't remember it being good or bad. Mostly because I just was so bored watching it.
Yeah.
And so just not interested in the way it was put together in the movie in general.
Yeah. So I thought the movie was paced pretty even. I think it was a little on the slow side, but it was consistent all the way through. The writing was okay, but it sort of required a lot of suspension of disbelief, which it can... That can be good in certain movies, and it can be really easy to achieve in a certain style of movie. This is probably not one of them. Two of the roles seemed a little superfluous, and probably could have been combined with another character, which I think would have helped the feeling of claustrophobia that you're kind of supposed to have. Claustrophobia and, conversely, kind of abandonment were two of the feelings that I felt like they were going for. And adding the extra characters probably made it feel a little less like that. It's very isolated, the area where they're supposed to be. All of the patients all but one of the patients in the clinic anyway are comatose, and the place is in the middle of nowhere. So there aren't a lot of people around it. It feels like even the nurses are just on their own. It's like you're caring for nothing. It's like you're caring for pillows or something. Did you get any of that? Do you remember any sense of that when you were watching that?
I kind of feel like playing there, and it just like not really making a ton of sense visually and script wise. Really disconnected me from the movie. Like if they were trying to set up some sort of like surreal atmosphere, which I think they were, but it didn't play that way. It didn't play well, and they didn't act that way. They more just act boring.
Right.
And it's in this surreal looking setup aesthetic. And it just made no sense. It made the movie make less sense than it already made.
Yeah, see, okay, I was actually just going to talk about that same thing. The set is this very old, awesome building. Carved wood, just really fantastic crown, molding and all of this stuff. Very, very, very old house, nice looking, well kept old house looking set. But it takes place. Oh, and the equipment, I think a lot of the equipment seems outdated.
Yeah, outdated equipment.
But it takes place in the era of GPS and smartphones.
Yeah,
and all
they
of
have
this
cell
stuff.
phones and stuff. Right?
Yeah, so it feels sort of anachronistic. Like, what are they going for? Why are you using this outdated equipment?
Like incredibly outdated. Not like, these are older.
No, really outdated stuff that hasn't been used for 30, 40, 50 years. So it came off feeling a little anachronistic. I really liked the set. I thought it was a really fantastic location that they had, but it just it didn't get the full effect because it takes place in a modern story, I thought.
The best part of the movie was those aesthetics.
Yeah, those
interesting shots with that stuff. Everything else was just really standard, if not bad.
Yeah. So one of my least favorite parts of the movie, personally,
good.
It has to do with the technology. So there's a character, and somehow the power, I think, goes out or something because it's a horror movie, and she's like trying to walk through, and find her way to the door or to a light switch or something like that, and she is using her smartphone, and she's taking pictures to do this.
Oh, right.
She's not every single smartphone on the market at this point. And this movie, it came out in 2013. This was still something you would have. You could just press a button and have a flashlight.
Download the flashlight app.
Just download the flashlight app. These days, it's preloaded on it. Yeah, exactly. So, and they're free. It's a free app. but this girl is taking pictures and flashing and trying to find her way through in the dark, and that made me so angry. Maybe it's just because I watched it in April of 2017, so maybe it wasn't as common to have flashlight apps, but I know people had them back then.
It was very common and it was very stupid.
Yeah.
The first time I saw a cell phone in the movie, I was like so mad. I was like, what the fuck is a cell phone doing in this movie? Where are we? What planet are we on?
Right.
Are these alien things? And then when she started doing that, I was like, oh, maybe they are. Maybe she's never seen one of these, and the only way she knows how to use the light is by taking a picture. Yeah. Just traveled through time. Yeah.
So one of the things I noted in my original review of this is that the movie is, besides being a little lackluster, it's not very scary. In fact, it's not really scary at all. I think a lot of that has to do with how hard it is to suspend your disbelief in this movie. It's taking place in the modern era, but it's making you presuppose things that just feel wrong.
Yeah, and it's actually kind of a love-ish story.
Yeah.
Slash horror.
Yeah, yeah.
So that also takes away from any sort of horror elements in a lot of ways.
Right. Yeah, it really does. Well, and like everything I had reviewed up to this point, I said that it was the least frightening material in any of those movies. Midnight Meat Train had gore. Anti-Birth had the creepy visuals that build up pretty well. Inner Demons had, that body contortion stuff that you always find in Possession and severe mental illness, whatever, those sorts of movies. This had a few fleeting moments of shock value, and they were always resolved so quickly that any chance that you had of like being creeped out is totally lost on it. As soon as they would start to show something being creepy, it would be squashed and finished in some way, and then it would be over. Do you remember anything about it being scary at all?
No, I don't. I just remember it being long and drawn out and boring.
Right.
And weird, because I had no idea what universe
any of this is supposed to take place.
Yeah, what reality this is supposed to be.
Yeah.
I was thinking, I had a theory within the movie watching length that they might be in a dream or in a coma about comas, but it didn't pan out. Spoiler alert! It
didn't pan out. So yeah, I kind of felt like maybe it would have, or I kind of feel now talking about it, like if they had somehow slipped in something about this being an alternate universe where for some reason smartphone technology had showed up, but medical technology hadn't advanced to the point that it has now, that it might have made for a better movie than what they ended up with. I mean, it still would have been boring for most of the length, but at least you would have been like, oh, that's why this is so weird.
Yeah, it's very hard to grasp, get past that part.
Yeah. Yeah.
But even if I did, and at one point I did, we're like, whatever, I don't care. It's a boring movie.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it was that on top of that.
Yeah, which is so unfortunate because, like I said, they had those resources. They had, well, first of all, the production value, like I said, very good. But Charles Dance, fantastic actor, just incredible actor, playing the lead doctor. And Rachel Griffiths is also a very good actress. She's more of a, both of them are sort of more character actors in American films. This is Australian, but in films and TV shows that we would be familiar with them, you see them in a lot of differing sorts of roles and stuff. And I thought they both did a really good job, and it was just wasted on this really kind of average movie. Did you have anything else? Any other final thoughts? Any recommendations? Who would like this?
I couldn't recommend this to anybody.
Yeah.
It's to me, it's really bad. I remember being really upset.
Right.
After watching it.
How bad it was.
Like, it's been a long time, but I remember being upset.
Yeah.
That I sat through the movie. 0 stars.
0 stars. We've got a 39-star review from Sam the last time he was on, and a 0 star from this one. Yeah, I also don't really think there's anybody I can recommend it to. I mean, if the story sounds appealing to you, then go ahead and watch it, I guess. It's fine. At least the acting is good. Beyond that, I really can't think of any other. I mean, Charles Dance, again, is really good, and
maybe Griffiths. If you really like the original, which I have not seen, I really do want to see.
Yeah.
Maybe then you would be interested to see how the take on it. Like,
And maybe it would be better if you had seen that, because you would understand more of those, the differences in why the style comes across. Because a lot of the reason why the suspension of disbelief doesn't work is the advancement of science since the 70s. So maybe if you saw that, you might appreciate that movie for what weirdness it is. But I think they really should have played up the weirdness.
If they were going to do that.
Yeah. But yeah, so if you've seen the original, it's maybe worth checking out the remake. I don't know whether you would like it or not, because I haven't seen it. I can't speak to that, but... All right, well, that was Patrick, and I think that was our podcast. If you liked this podcast, which I, just as news for this whole fiasco of my trying to upload everything, I will probably still put this episode up on YouTube in case that you have been watching it off of YouTube up to this point. But it will be on Stitcher. I'm waiting for approval from iTunes. I assume I'll get it. It's on podcast. Should be in the next 24 hours up on Podcast Addict. A heads up, there is a problem with the first episode on Stitcher for some reason. That I'm hoping the feed just updates and it fixes itself. If not, I'll have to do something else. But yeah, you should be able to find it in a lot of podcast directories now. Specifically, Stitcher is probably the one that you'll know the most of. And Podcast Addict, which is generally the one that I use for podcasting. You can also share this on social media. You can find me on Twitter, Instagram. I haven't posted anything on Instagram, to be fair, but I am there. Facebook. Gosh, there's something else, I think.
Twitter?
I said Twitter, yeah.
Instagram?
YouTube, maybe.
Facebook?
All of them. I'm on all of most of them. Posting this stuff. So yeah, in future episodes you can just get off of Stitcher, so you don't have to watch this on YouTube if that's where you found this one. Yeah, did you have any other things that you'd like to say? Anything else you want to talk about? Nah? Okay. All right, well, thank you for listening. Yeah, have a great night, and hopefully we've encouraged you to watch the Midnight Meat Train if you like Clive Barker. I think that's the biggest takeaway from this episode. Midnight Meat Train.
I don't know.
Clive
Dangerous
Barker.
Game.
Dangerous Game, yeah.
I like Dangerous Game better than Midnight Meat Train.
I know you did. Okay, yeah. All right, we'll say goodbye.
Bye.
All right, thanks for listening.